Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by acknowledging the community partners up here with me. Pahua Vang from Minkasa, Vina Iyer from the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, Eder Castillo from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, Councilmember Jason Chavez, and the following community representatives from the following community organizations. AUSER, the Binger Center for New Americans, the Minnesota Hispanic Bar Association, the International Institute of Minnesota, the Minnesota Immigrant Movement, the Minnesota-Dakota chapter of the American Immigrant Lawyers Association. Thank you all for joining us today. These organizations provide vital resources to our immigrant community members who make up more than 10% of Hennepin County's population. That's 1 in 10 members of the community in Hennepin County. Also, as I mentioned, up here is Eder Castillo, behind me, an attorney in our office who has helped lead our work and to design this new policy. The team doing this work has put in a considerable amount of time and effort to craft a nation-leading policy. I'm so grateful to have this team in our office and doing this impactful work. Many other members of the team that have made it possible to get to this day are here as well. Some of them are up here, and I want to acknowledge the whole team. Deanna Smith, who's the head of DASC, Travis Sigafus, Nikki Slick, Glenn Burt, Sarah Hagelin, Jen White, and Claire Deagle. We know our immigrant community members report crime at a far lower rate than other residents. And we know that our non-citizen neighbors face additional barriers to reporting crime, including fear of deportation. This means that victims are afraid to report domestic violence, sexual violence, and trafficking, among other types of crimes. Because of these barriers, non-citizens are being denied justice, and law enforcement and prosecutors don't have the valuable tools that we need to protect public safety. Despite this, there are those who want us to believe that we are safer when immigrants are forced to live in the shadows. There are those who want us to believe that we must sacrifice justice to achieve safety. We at the Hennepin County Attorney's Office reject that. Using every tool available to us to ensure that victims are able to cooperate with law enforcement can only aid the detection, investigation, and prosecution of crime, which is a critical step towards greater public safety. The policy we're announcing today regarding U and T visas will help protect the non-citizens in our community while making us all safer. U and T visas provide immigration benefits to crime victims who have been helpful, are being helpful, or will be helpful in the detection, investigation, and prosecution of certain crimes. These visas were actually created by Congress almost 25 years ago. Historically, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office did not make full use of this public safety tool. In fact, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office put up additional barriers that were never intended by Congress. I made it a priority of my administration to change that. Today, we are announcing one of the nation's most comprehensive U and T visa policy. This new policy was crafted to strengthen law enforcement's ability to detect and solve crimes and to increase trust in the legal system with vulnerable populations who are often preyed upon. This policy brings us in line with the policy of the Department of Homeland Security. But a policy on its own isn't enough. We want to join with law enforcement and community and partners to ensure that the policy is actually effective. I want to thank our law enforcement partners for their engagement and receptiveness on this issue. We met with our chiefs in Hennepin County during 4 meetings in January. Many were enthusiastic about this new policy and our ability to help them on this policy as well. More than anyone, they know the value of victims coming forward with information when it comes to solving crimes. I also want to thank the community organizations here today and other organizations that serve the immigrant community for providing legal aid and other vitally important services that support victims in our community. We know that trust is earned, and we will do our best to earn the trust of our immigrant community members so that they will come forward when they are harmed. These changes are the result of an incredible amount of research and time spent crafting policies that can make the greatest positive impact on our communities, the people who live in them, and our partners who protect them. Most notably, I want to thank the Hennepin County Attorney's staff involved for their dedication to creating this nation-leading policy.
Good afternoon. My name is Pahua Vang. I am the Interim Executive Director at MINCASA, the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault, where we envision a world free of sexual violence in which all human beings are treated with dignity and respect, and communities are transformed through safety, healing, and partnerships. There you go. Is this better? We know that sexual assault is the most underreported violent crime, and a person's immigration status can create additional barriers to ever accessing help. If you are a survivor or you're a loved one of a survivor, I want you to know that there are free and confidential community-based advocacy services available for you, regardless of your immigration status. This is the first step you can take to know your options, to get connected to resources, and to be supported. A community-based advocate can help you safety plan, get your basic needs met, obtain protection orders, help you make your own informed decisions, and emotionally support you whether or not you choose to report to the police. If you make the decision to report, your advocate can be there with you through every step of the way. If you get connected, and help you get connected to an immigration lawyer and support you through the process of obtaining a U or T visa. Non-citizen survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, trafficking, stalking, and other crimes can be eligible to apply for a U or T visa through the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service, but the process can be difficult, lengthy, and confusing. There are advocates, lawyers, and community organizations that can help, and we can get you connected if you don't know where to start. As part of the visa application, you must submit a certification form, typically from a police department, county attorney's office, or other certifying officials. The purpose of this form is to describe the victim's helpfulness in the criminal case and the physical and mental abuse the victim suffered. Hennepin County Attorney's Office is one of those agencies that can help you with a certification form if the crime committed against you occurred in Hennepin County. Their policy is written in plain language for ease of access, announces its commitment to being trauma-informed and culturally responsive, and names practices that will or will not be used to ensure a victim-centered response. If you are a victim needing this certification, your criminal background will not be used to make a decision on certification. Neither will the outcome of the case, whether the incident was charged, or whether the perpetrator was arrested. The policy presumes that the victim will be helpful unless there is evidence to suggest otherwise. It recognizes the barriers victims may face, such as further threats of violence, housing issues, or illnesses that may be interfering with the victim's ability to cooperate in the case. If a certification were to be denied, it must go through 2 more people, and both certifying officials must agree. They understand the culturally responsive needs of victims and will prioritize staff with lived experience and familiarity with immigration laws as the primary certifying official. The review committee will also involve multilingual systems-based advocates as the county continues to recruit for, hire, and retain advocates who are culturally responsive, multilingual, and dedicated to working for immigrant victims. They will also provide language access training to staff when working with interpreters and document the language preferences for all victims and witnesses. By intentionally naming these practices and policy and making it accessible to the public, victims will be more informed and less anxious in making their decisions. They will know what to expect, how it will be done, and when they can receive an answer. This simple fact alone will make the victim's experience much smoother. As a statewide organization, we encourage all agencies who sign certifications, including county attorney offices and police departments, to review their current policies and adopt similar practices to ensure that they are victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive to the needs of victim survivors. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Vina Iyer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. The Immigrant Law Center has been proud to support new American survivors of violence for over 25 years. Our clients are neighbors who have suffered trauma due to crime, but have bravely been willing to report those crimes to make themselves, their families, and their communities safer. The UNT visas are critical tools for law enforcement, and they are essential for immigrant survivors to move towards safety, stability, and prosperity. Make no mistake, the U and the T visa make real differences in people's lives. They are the visas that, for members of our own board of directors, have enabled them to be able to escape from violence, to be able to go to school, and to be working in our communities to support young people. The UNT visas are necessary for all of us in our communities, and we therefore welcome the Hennepin County Attorney's Office's new UNT visa policy, which aims to dismantle the barriers to safety and security for immigrant survivors and witnesses of crime. We hope that the policy will allow immigrant survivors to feel more supported in our communities. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Chavez, and I am the council member of the 9th Ward, where we are currently at. I'm proud to represent a diverse and immigrant community here in Minneapolis, which this policy is going to directly benefit. I'm extremely proud of Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty's initiative and the work she's done with community partners to bring this forward. That's going to tremendously impact the lives of our residents across the city and across Hennepin County. Specifically, the culturally specific services and multilingual victim liaisons that will help remove barriers and increase access across the county. The trauma-informed and victim-centered lens that will help rebuild trust within the immigrant community here in the Hennepin County. And lastly, the commitment to swift support from the county attorney's office that will help tremendously. They will now process certification requests within 30 days or 7 days for victims in deportation proceedings. And as a council member that represents a variety of non-citizens and undocumented immigrants across the city, this is a game changer. I am extremely proud of this policy change that's going to rebuild relationships across our city and county. And if it wasn't for the work being put up by Hennepin County Attorney Mary Moriarty and the community right here behind us, we wouldn't be seeing more engagement in our community. So I'm proud to be here today.
Questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because this UNT just program has been around for a long time as a federal program. So what is unique about this that wasn't there? Like people could always please do.
So you're right. As I said in my remarks, Congress passed this legislation 25 years ago. So what's different? The difference is the Hennepin County Attorney's Office approach. As I mentioned in my remarks, the County Attorney's Office before my administration put up barriers that weren't intended to be there. And it was also, and I can give you an example, when I came in, I said, what do we do if a victim says or starts to talk about a visa or immigration or something like that? And the response I got was, we shut down that conversation. So we shut down that conversation. That wasn't something that we wanted to hear about it. But there are 5 differences in the way we are approaching this, and I'm going to have Eder Castillo come up and talk about those.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that question. So in discussing the particulars of our policy, I'll begin with eligibility. Before this policy that we're announcing today, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office would only certify for victims in cases that were referred to our office for prosecution. This meant that our office would turn away victims who suffered crimes that would qualify them for URT visa, but whose cases were not referred to for prosecution. So today we're announcing that we'll certify URT visas for victims of any qualifying crime that occurs in Hennepin County and for their families. That's regardless of whether that crime turns into a criminal case in our office. So this includes, for example, domestic violence cases where victims are asking for orders of protection, but there's not necessarily a criminal case in existence. This includes victims of qualifying crimes that are being prosecuted by city attorneys as opposed to our office, but are happening in our county. This includes victims of qualifying crimes that have been investigated, but were never referred to us for prosecution. We're also announcing that we will certify URT visas for all residents of Hennepin County, regardless of where their qualifying crime occurred. So our new policy is meant to be inclusive, so that all non-citizen victims who've been harmed in Hennepin County or live in Hennepin County and their families feel safe enough to tell us their story. Next, I want to turn to how swiftly we'll support victims, and this has been mentioned by some of our partners already. Before this policy, the office would rarely, if ever, certify URT visa requests when a case was being actively prosecuted. In other words, victims would have to wait until their case had ended. That meant that victims were left anxiously wondering if they would be deported during the process of their case. Now we will certify with predictability. We will certify within 30 days for victims and within 7 days if they're in removal proceedings. We actually have certified a case within 48 hours where a victim was on the verge of being deported during their case as it was actively being prosecuted. This will give victims predictability, and that way they will feel safe enough to cooperate with law enforcement and with us. Next, I want to turn to how we measure victim helpfulness. To receive a U visa, a victim has to be helpful, have been helpful, or is likely to be helpful in the detection, investigation, prosecution, conviction, or sentencing of their case. Unfortunately, some agencies have required victims to go above and beyond in unattainable ways that re-traumatize them. Today, we're announcing that our new policy will presume victim helpfulness instead of ask for it, and it will review victim helpfulness through a trauma-informed lens. This new policy is meant to avoid re-traumatizing victims. It doesn't ask victims to be perfect, and we acknowledge that every UNT visa request is at our office or at an office because a victim has been helpful. That's how we detected the case, and that's how our request comes to be. We're also not considering criminal history when it comes to victims. This office used to scrutinize a victim's criminal history all the way down to their parking tickets. We are no longer doing that. Why? Because that recognizes the dynamics of being a victim. That when someone is a victim, it often involves a defendant who will then weaponize the justice system against them and create cross allegations that create a burden and a criminal history for that person as well. It also acknowledges that the Department of Homeland Security will be vetting every U or T visa at multiple stages in a criminal history search that is nationwide and that we couldn't even duplicate. And that's why the Department of Homeland Security does not ask us to vet people's criminal history, and we won't be doing it. We're also committing to culturally specific and linguistically accessible victim services, and we do that through our hiring. We have the largest cohort of victim advocates that can speak multiple languages and represent our community and every aspect and facet of who we are. We're hoping that makes people feel safe. And then some minor things is that we have created an email inbox, visa@hennepin.us, which is brand new for people to reach us, and also hennepinattorney.org/visa for people to have public-facing information that's transparent and where our policy will be put up. And last of all, something that's not in writing, but it's visible here, is that our relationship with community partners makes this all possible. That without them, we can't reach people, and a policy is worthless if nobody knows about it. Policies like these are not possible without the quiet, steady, and unheralded work of our community partners on the stage. Thank you for that question.
Can you provide some context on about how many UNT visas have been approved historically in Hennepin County every year, and how many do you anticipate might be approved with this new initiative?
I'll have Edo address that again.
The reason that we completely overhauled this policy and really are seeking to be nation leading is because our certifications have plummeted since 2015. And we have never had great practices, and even in those years, we used to get about 80 victims, which is a tiny amount for the cases that we process. But even that is a lot more compared to what we received in the last 2 years, which is about 25 per year. So we really believe that victims have chosen to go and certify their cases elsewhere with agencies that perhaps are more trusting than we have been. And so we're trying to change that and ensure that victims throughout the county have a place that they can call home and a place they can bring their UNT visa requests.
So
Thank you.
back when there used to be more, about how many was it?
I believe we peaked at about 80, a little under 80.
When
In-
did the policy take effect, or has it been kind of gradual, or is this just starting now?
This is starting now. We've been making changes ever since the beginning of last year. Pretty much from day one, County Attorney Mary Moriarty came to our UNT visa team and said, come up with your dream policy. And ever since that moment, we haven't hesitated to look at UNT visas differently, and we've tried to create a policy that meets this moment in time.
You said it peaked at 80. How many are you anticipating that you might get in the next year?
So some data that I have is that our county processes more than 400 a year. That's just looking at a few agencies that receive a lot of requests. Obviously, all of those happen within our county. That means that we could be seeing 400 or more per year. And we believe that this is something brand new and way more inclusive than we've ever done. So we'll be surprised, I think, by how many we receive.
Talking about those other counties that have a lot more cases, what are the places in Minnesota or out of state?
From my understanding, the biggest certifying agency is the Minneapolis Police Department. That's where I get my data from.
Has non-citizen population in Hennepin County increased over the last months? If so, can you give some overall, just in like an estimate, context-wise?
I don't have exact numbers in terms of trends in the last few months, but I've seen data from the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs for the city of Minneapolis that shows incoming new Americans that are coming here from all over the world. The New York Times also published a report on children coming from all over the world unaccompanied. But I believe there is a very large group from South America specifically that are arriving, and that's shown in your stories that you've published.
How do you build trust, particularly with someone who may be undocumented? How do you get them to trust somebody in an elected office and position?
I think the first part is a policy like this, and I have to emphasize again how hard our team worked on this. I'm not an expert in this area, and when I met with them, I did say, come up with your dream policy, and they worked very hard, and they did. But events like this, and being in partnership and relationship with community, because they're the people who have relationships in community. And I think a lot of this is word of mouth. And if we start doing this and those policies change, we are going to be able to prove to people that we are trustworthy, and that word will get out there. So this is our hope. This is our policy. We're being very proactive in helping people. But I think it's going to come down to what we are actually doing and word of mouth and what our community partners say about us. I mean, they really haven't had much incentive to trust us in the past. But so we have to have a policy like this, and we have to have it be effective.
Do these visas expire after a few years? Or how do they kind of work?
So there is no immediate gratification when it comes to these visas. When someone applies for a U or T visa, it takes more than a decade for them to receive the actual visa. What happens in between that time can vary, but between about 4 and 5 years after they've requested that visa, they then receive a work permit, and that work permission is life-changing. It takes people from working in the shadows to working legitimately, to being able to provide a wage that is fair, and being able to provide for their families. There's also been times when a U visa request that has been certified has stopped the deportation. That's not necessarily a law that they wouldn't have to deport somebody, but it would be weighed in that decision. So it can have some immediate effects, but there's no immediate guarantees until about 5 years or 10 years out. And I should say the path to citizenship is more than 20 years out, about 25 years.
Are most of the people who would be qualified for these UNT visas undocumented, or are they maybe of a different immigration status where they have a visa that's running out? What do you see?
So they can have a variety of statuses. First of all, of course, anyone who is unauthorized or undocumented would benefit greatly from this because they have no status at all. But there are certainly people who are here on visas of all sorts that do not have a path to citizenship, that are not permanent, using the words that you used. So this U visa can transform, for example, an international student that's studying at the University of Minnesota and is a victim of a sexual assault on campus. This visa would provide them an opportunity to not just have a temporary visa, but to have an opportunity to stay here in this country and to cooperate with their case.
Question?
I did want to say one last thing because I forgot to recognize Brian Walsh. Brian Walsh is the head of our worker protection division. He's in the process of building that out. So he will be working on wage theft, all levels of worker protection, trafficking, that kind of thing. And the UT visa policy fits right into that, where we will be able to help people come forward when they are the victims of crimes. I talked about sexual and domestic violence, but there's also a huge area of labor trafficking, wage theft, people being brought up here, living in terrible places and being trafficked for work. And so Brian is working on building out our division there. Thank you so much.